Overconsumption is a hot topic, not just recently, but for decades at this point. I mean, back in the early 19th century, economists were coining phrases like conspicuous consumption and how the relation between purchasing and social status can be used in marketing. That's not to say that I look at my collection of books and consciously think this makes me seem better off in life, but over the years, particularly when I'm filming book videos, I've wanted to purchase books just to have them to fill up the space. Granted, I wasn't actually spending a ton on books, or I didn't feel like I was at the time. After all, I was just getting 2 book boxes a month. I was occasionally purchasing books I had already read and loved, but I wasn't actually reading any of the books I was getting from boxes. And between the boxes, Kindle Unlimited, Audible, and Overand, how much was I digitally or physically consuming for no reason? As I look into who I want to be in 2025, I don't want to be someone who adds hundreds of dollars worth of books to carts and thinks I'll get to these one day, with absolutely no purpose behind it. Same could be said for home decor, skincare, and clothes. I just don't tend to fixate on those things in the same way. So I have here all of my unread books, not including my manga shelf. I've been thinking about not only the amount of money that I spend on Kindle Unlimited, Comixology, Overand. I had Audible at one point. I get 2 subscription boxes. I spend quite a bit of money on books, and then I end up not reading. Have been thinking a lot about how I show up, my impact, my footprint, and I don't want my legacy to be wasteful, just contributing to a landfill. Just like we talk about overconsumption and underconsumption, there is like a thing called normal consumption of just like living your life. I think there's a level that you can reach that is not sustainable for you and for your lifestyle, and each person's level of overconsumption has to be evaluated by them. I myself don't purchase a lot of things, and the thing that I spend the most money on, aside from like bills, is books. Bills and my animals is books. Like, I haven't read any of these, and they're sitting on my shelf, and there could be someone that loves these and like wants them. And so I think my goal is to get my physical TBR down and to not have such a large physical TBR going forward. Like, I want to make sure that every book that I am bringing into my house, I'm reading the same month that I got it, and I want to be more mindful of my book purchasing. I tend to be someone that reads really heavily on my Kindle through my library or through Kindle Unlimited. I use my library quite a bit, so I'm not purchasing every single book that I want to read, but I also am not reading every single book that I get. Very much in one of those people that I don't purchase books that I haven't read yet, but as you can see from the stack, I have been guilty of that in the past, and I'm just not comfortable with that, especially with these book boxes. I'm not reading them, and it's very wasteful for me. Wasteful of money, wasteful of space. Someone else could be enjoying these stories. So I think my goal for this video is I'm going to read the first chapter of all of these books and be really honest with myself about whether I'm going to read them in the future. Not like, oh, this just isn't hitting right now, maybe I'll get to it at some point. Like, I need to be very honest. I'm obviously not going to like throw them out. I'm either going to donate them or put them up on my Pango for anybody interested. And then going forward, like, no unread books. If I decide to get book boxes, I need to like read them the month that I get them, and I don't need to have a huge collection of unread books. That's what we're going to be doing in this video. Decide what we're going to do from there. These are the non-special edition books that I have. Some of these were gifted to me. We obviously have The Handmaid's Tale, and I believe this is the second one. I have tried to read The Handmaid's Tale before. It's deeply depressing. I'm going to give it another shot. The Stone Sky and the Obelisk Gate are obviously part of the same series. I adored the first one, so I'm pretty confident that I'll want to continue. The Bladed Faith and Malice, I'm not quite sure about. Malice I've tried before. Bladed Faith I never really gave much of an effort. These 2 Leanne Moriarty's were gifted to me by my mom. I have read one Leanne Moriarty and didn't love it, but I'm up for trying again. Same with The Bone Shard Daughter. I tried it and wasn't the biggest fan, but again, we're gonna try again. And then we have these 3 Brandon Sandersons, which I'm pretty sure I'm gonna read. I have read 3 Brandon Sandersons already and gave all of them 5 stars, so. And then we have my shameful stack of special editions. I can't even say that any of these were gifted to me because I purchased all of these with my own money. Howl's Moving Castle I bought because I wanted the special edition. Hadn't even read the book yet. I know nothing really about any of them. We're gonna see how it goes. Some of them are YA, some of them are adult. We're gonna read the first chapter, and if I don't love them, I really hope some people want some special editions. I have the first 3 that we're gonna read picked out. So we have The Hamajan Luck, A Language of Dragons, and Voyage of the Damned. We're gonna read the first chapter of each, see how it goes, but first I need to make my second coffee of the day. So let's do that. So I have finished the first 3 books for this little reading challenge, and I started with A Language of Dragons. I think this is the newest book I've added to my collection. The first chapter was 32 pages, and this follows a girl who is living in 1923 in London, and there's currently a alliance between the humans and the dragons, but there are rebels that are trying to overthrow the whole alliance and the current government structure. There seems to be like a class difference, and people that are in first, second, and third class are all treated differently. The heroine is trying to get into a dragon academy, and in this opening chapter, her mother has a meeting with a very influential person. She's like going out to do her job before the dinner with her cousin, and they get involved in like this riot that ends in a death of a rebel, and then at the dinner her family gets arrested, and that ends the first chapter. This is pretty strong, pretty interesting. I like the idea of an academy. We'll see how that goes. If she ends up getting there, I would assume so, but obviously it's going to be involving rebellion and all that kind of stuff. I would say this was the most interesting of the 3. I like dragons. I like really strong fantasy elements. I'm interested to see where like the rebellion aspect goes, and the writing was immediately gripping. I then read Hamajang Luck. This is a sci-fi, and in the opening chapter, the main character is being released from a prison that is on a different planet, and she has been in the prison for 8 years. We gather that she was involved in a heist, and when she's released from the prison, someone from her past shows up and says, like, I'm gonna try to rob him again. I now have influence in his life, and I think that we can, like, complete this heist together. She initially denies the person, and she like goes back home, and that's the end of the first chapter there. It's a relatively short one compared to the other 3. It's only 15 pages, so not as interested in this one as initially I was with the first one, just because the first chapter wasn't like massively gripping. It was definitely more setup than the first one was. And then lastly, I read Voyage of the Damned. The first chapter was again 15 pages, and this followed a guy who was on the run from the palace guards, and he's causing mayhem on this island where this like festival to celebrate the 8 different kingdoms. And he is the son of one of the provinces blessed, and these are people that have been given gifts by the gods, and it's like an inherited gift, it's passed down. But he is not the only son of his father or the only child of his father, but his province doesn't recognize illegitimate children, so from a young age his father forced him to pretend that he inherited the magic, and now he has to go on this adventure pretending to be somebody that he's not, with all of the other provinces inherited blessed children or whatever. This is definitely the least interesting, so I think this is going to be my ranking. I would want to try Language of Dragons and then go like that. So if I were to have to unhaul, I would probably unhaul Voyage of the Damned at this point, but we still have many, many books to go. So let's pick our next 3 and get into them. We are done with our next 3. First up, we have Howl's Moving Castle. Like I said, this was a special edition that I got because my partner loves this movie, and when Fairy Loot announced that they were doing an exclusive edition, I wanted to purchase it for our collection, and then I watched the Studio Ghibli movie, and I fell in love with it. So I want to read the book, but I'm not unhauling this, like if I don't like it. 24 pages in, which is when chapter 2 starts. I believe this is a children's novel, so the writing is not super complex, but we were basically just introduced to Sophie's character, and like the setup for her life. She works for her family's hat making business. She's the eldest sister, and she's just not like thrilled by her life, and she's not doing like exactly what she wants to be doing, but she's like devoted to her family, so she's doing what is expected of her. And then I started The Darkness Within Us. This is the second book in whatever this like Shadows Between Us series is. This seems to be about the heroine from the first one's sister, and she is married to this old guy who's like lecherous, but he's on his deathbed. She's like 19, and she's always had this like internal rivalry with her sister that like she will have the best life. She will get married to the rich guy and like fulfill all of her dreams first. And then she finds out that her sister is going to be marrying the king from the first one, and so she murders her husband. And that's the first chapter. It's only 10 pages, but this writing is like criminally small. So I read the first one in the series. It was okay. It was like a 3-star. I couldn't tell you a lick about it. The main thing that I got from the story was like the heroine was supposed to be this badass like assassin, and she just wasn't that. I read the first chapter of A Tempest of Tea, 14 pages. And I have read Hafsa Faisal's really popular duology. I read the first book, tried to read the second book, couldn't get into it at the time, but I really loved the first one. I think this is set in the same world, I'm not entirely sure. When I received this in a box, I was pretty excited to get into it because I love their writing, but I couldn't make sense of what was happening when I read it the first time, and so I was reading some like early reviews that said that you kind of have to read the other series to understand what's going on in here. And then I read the first chapter and understood what was happening. Like, not that anything crazy happens in this first chapter to begin with, but I didn't see anybody saying like they had to read the other series. So I am the most interested in this one of the 3, but I don't know if I have to read the other series to understand that one. So I'm definitely going to get back into it, but the first chapter was basically just setup. And I would say this is where we're sitting now. Still the most interested in Language of Dragons, then Tempest of Tea, so on and so forth. So our next 3 are The Last Hour Between Worlds, which I think is a sapphic sci-fi, time travel, The Girl with No Reflection, and To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods. Okay, let's talk about our next 3 that I just finished. First up, we have The Last Hour Between Worlds. The first chapter was 10 pages, and I was pretty much immediately interested in this. Like I said, this is a sapphic sci-fi. The opening chapter follows what I'm assuming is the main character. After she has been on maternity leave, she goes to a party for her work, and she discovers this weird clock, and her nemesis is there as well. She seems to work for some sort of like time-based industry, and her nemesis is like a thief. So I'm pretty interested in this one. The first chapter, while it was a little bit like uneventful, I'm gripped. Then we read the first chapter of The Girl with No Reflection. This was another pretty short one. It was 6 pages, and this was so gripping. Basically about a woman who is supposed to get married, and she's visiting this pond, and in her reflection looks different than she does. That's kind of where the chapter ends, but there's a lot of stuff at play here. She's been locked up in her room. She's not been allowed to leave. Her future husband seems a little bit not interested in her, let's say, and the family seems a little not as loving and accepting of her. So, pretty interested in this one. I would say slightly more interested in this one than the time one, but they're pretty damn close. And then lastly, the first chapter of To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods was 10 pages. Now, this has sat on my shelf for a while now. I was interested in reading this last year. I don't know when I got it from Fairy Loot, but I was interested in reading it last year. And I went to Goodreads and I saw some reviews, some Own Voices reviews of people that had issues with this. I also watched some videos of some people explaining their issues with the novel. I have been putting it off, and I think I'm going to read it. I don't think I'll talk about it too terribly much, and if I don't end up liking it, I probably won't try to sell it or donate it or anything, just because I don't necessarily want to like spread the story around if so many people have issues with it. So I'm going to try to read it just because I own it and I want to like read the books that I have, but it's going to stay with me. I won't talk about it too much, and I'm going to leave some reviews down in the description to check out if you're interested in the novel and you want to know what's going on with it. They'll be there. Obviously, Own Voices. These two have definitely hopped to the top of my interest level. This is Under the Dragon Academy one, and then Tempest of Tea, and then this one, and I would say this one is like the bottom. So, let's get the next 3. We have 12 left. So I decided to just read the remaining 12 first chapters, and we could talk about them. So first up, The Handmaid's Tale. The first chapter of this is like only 2 pages, and honestly, the writing was a little bit easier than I remembered when I tried to read this previously. I want to read this series. I just sometimes am not able to. Just the connections between what's currently going on in our world and this are just a little too strong sometimes. My mental well-being is just not good enough, but I want to read this. So I'm going to keep it. I probably won't read it anytime soon. Was intrigued by the first chapter. The writing style seems good, and I do have the first and second books. So then we have Truly Madly Guilty by Leanne Moriarty. This is the same author as Big Little Lies. The first chapter of this is 9 pages, and I was intrigued by this. I know Leanne Moriarty doesn't necessarily write the most like riveting murder mysteries, but I do think this one has to do with a mystery. Conversely, I read the first chapter of What Alice Forgot, and I won't be continuing this one because it's not a murder mystery, romantic comedy or something. It's about a woman who gets injured and And when she wakes up, she's like 10 years older than she was supposed to be. And she has to like get her memories back. So I'm not interested in that one. We have The Bladed Faith. I was able to get through the first chapter of it. It is, I think, like 15 pages. I'm still interested in the story. It's a revenge story. So same with Malice. I have read this previously, or I've started this previously. The setup for this is very interesting. The first chapter is like literally a page. It's just some like setup for the gods and the world and how the war that's going on is currently, like how it started. But I've read 50 pages of this previously. Again, I want to read more of John Gwen's novels, so I will be keeping this. And then also we have The Bone Shard Daughter. I've read 100 pages of this previously, and I just am not a fan of this. I will not be keeping this. I tried to like reread it thinking that it might catch my interest in a way that it didn't the first time, and I just didn't find it interesting the second time. Well, this is technically the third time I've tried to read it. Alright, so let's get into the last 6. So we have Of Jade and Dragons. The first chapter of this is 10 pages, and in the start of this, a young girl finds her father dead, and she's always dreamed of being an engineer, and she seems like a little inventor. Her father tells her not to like dig into why he was murdered, and I think she like plots her revenge. Very interested in this. Those 10 pages were like immediately gripping. I'm fascinated by where the story is going to go. This cover, everything about this just has me very interested. Another novel that I will not be keeping is Until We Shatter. The first chapter is only, I didn't keep track because I knew I wasn't planning on keeping it. First chapter is 13 pages. And this seems to be a heist novel. Just based on the description, this isn't really calling my name. The first chapter of Fathom Folk is 10 pages. This follows a siren who is a commander in the army of humans. The merfolk seem to be not well regarded, and I think there's some like conflict with the city itself. But the first chapter was just her appointment and like kind of setting up for disparities that she faces and the racism, frankly, that she faces. And we also were introduced to her current partner. So this has terrible reviews, but I'm gonna give it a shot. This one I'm not too terribly sure of, but we have Goddess of the River. This is a reimagining of the story of the Goddess of the River forced into a mortal body, and she marries a king, and he separates her from her child. And so this is like them reuniting. I'm not a fan of mother-child stories, but I do want to give it a shot. The first chapter was like only a page, and it was just like her falling. So I do think that I'm gonna give it a shot. Sleep Like Death is 20 pages for chapter 1. This is a Snow White retelling. I don't like fairy tale retellings really in most capacities, and this is a YA. I was not blown away by the writing, so I think I'm gonna list this. And then lastly, we have The Scarlet Alchemist. The first chapter of this is 12 pages, and it follows a girl having a dream. And the dream is a little bit hard to follow, but I have tried to read this previously. I think I got like 25 pages in or something like that, but it's about an alchemist, and the main character has always dreamed of like working for the emperor and being like the emperor's alchemist. So I'm gonna try it again. That's the first chapter of all of the books. Let's put a ranking on them. Okay, this is a little harder to do than I was anticipating, so I will just read them off to you, and I can't hold my microphone, so hopefully the sound doesn't get too bad. So the book that I'm most interested in is Of Jade and Dragons. Then we have A Language of Dragons, The Girl with No Reflection, Malice. Then A Tempest of Tea, Goddess of the River, The Last Hour Between Worlds, The Handmaid's Tale, The Scarlet Alchemist, Fathom Folk, Humajang Luck, Howl's Moving Castle, Truly Madly Guilty, and To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods. So that means that the ones that I will be listing on my Pango, if you are interested, with full pictures of everything is The Darkness Within Us, Voyage of the Damned, Sleep Like Death, Until We Shatter, The Bone Shard Daughter, and What Alice Forgot. So if you're interested in any of these, I will leave my Pango shop down below. I will also include a link to, I think it's $5 off your first purchase or something like that. I'll leave it all down below in the description so you can like see for yourself and know what you're getting into when you go in, but I'll have these listed. That's it for the video. I will say a lot of the books that I am keeping and that I have ranked, I'm very interested in. That's not to say that like I might unhaul them and list them when I get through them if they're not like 4 stars and above, because I'm really not trying to keep stories on my shelf that I'm not in love with. I would love to talk down below on your thoughts on anything that I talked about in this video. If you've read any of these books, if you're interested in any of these books, let me know. If you are having a crisis with your collection, or you're trying to grow your collection, or whatever the situation is, I would love to talk. Thank you so much for watching. All of my social medias will be linked down below. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my backlist if you're looking for more content from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.